to our first company now, and it's Blencowe Resources. It's the London-listed graphite company advancing the 100% owned Orom-Cross graphite project in Uganda, which is one of the world's largest estimated graphite deposits. I'm delighted to be joined by the Chief Executive, Mike Ralston. Mike, over to you. Good to see you.
Good evening, Sarah, and thank you for having me. And it's great to be here. So without further ado, I've got 30 minutes, so I better jump in. Blencowe Resources, as you say, is developing the Orom-Cross graphite project, which is a very unique graphite project located in Uganda. The journey so far is we've owned this project for approximately 5 years. We acquired it in 2020. As you can see on the screen, we've completed a lot of work. We acquired it with a 21-year mining license, which is a fantastic asset to have. But in that time, we've done a couple of drilling programs. We've done a scoping study. We did a pre-feasibility study, and we are now well into the journey to complete a definitive feasibility study. And that has taken a little bit of time, and that's because in graphite, DFSs have a particular quirk, which is all about the offtake and the pre-qualification process in order to be able to get end users ready and accepting of the end product. And so we've done a 100-ton bulk sample test program, and more lately in 2024, a 600-ton bulk sample test program. And I must say they've gone very well, and so they obviously have worked in our favor. At the moment, we are in the process of completing a third drilling program for just under 7,000 meters, and that's designed to both upgrade our resources and our reserves, and as part of the DFS, and ultimately we'll complete that DFS around about the middle of this year, if everything goes to plan. And we think that with that drilling program and the DFS completion, there's a big value inflection point for the company. And that leads us into first production in 2026. And I'll go into our production story in a minute. But I think that we've completed a lot of the work, as you can see, over the last couple of years, and we've got a very exciting 12 months ahead of us. So what does Orom-Cross look like? It's huge. It's 2 to 3 billion tons estimated. We'll never drill it out because it just doesn't make any sense. But there's graphite for about 20 kilometers in strike, starting at surface, going down to, well, we've drilled down to about 100 meters and seen there's graphite there. So there's an enormous amount of graphite going forward. And in a world that is going to demand a lot of graphite, having this size and scale is important. As I said before, we've got a 21-year mining license in place. Very importantly, we've got strong government and community support. And I believe that Uganda is one of the safest countries to develop a long-term project. I come from Zimbabwe originally, and I've lived in East Africa for a number of years. So I know the area well, and I think Uganda is a fantastic location. The government couldn't be more supportive of Blencowe, and that obviously is very important as we go forward. PFS was very exciting and gave us some great results. And ultimately, the most important thing in graphite is what does your end product look like? You do a lot of met test work, you do a lot of bulk sample test work, and all of that work that we've done proves that Orom-Cross has some of the highest quality end product as concentrate and as purified graphite that is out there in the world. And that is borne out by some of the offtake relationships that we're building at the moment. And then we're building a whole lot of key relationships, which I'll go into in a minute. Obviously, these are key and critical for us going forward. So what does it all mean? At the end of the day, what do we have as unique differentiation to our peers and into the market, which makes Blencowe and Orom-Cross stand out? For me, having done a lot of work in graphite over a period of time, I think you have to get down to the core of the business fundamentals. And at the end of the day, if you have low operating costs, low capital costs, and a high purity of end product, you have what I call the trifecta, or I like to call it the holy grail. Because at the end of the day, if you're missing any one of these key fundamentals, you've got a lot of problems. You can't necessarily change the area that you're operating in, where your project is. And some of the places in the Western markets have very high operating costs, and that renders your project a lot more difficult in terms of making a margin and ultimately business decisions. If your capital costs are high because you're sitting in the middle of nowhere and you've got to provide all the infrastructure to get it up, that creates an enormous amount of pressure, not just in terms of raising additional capital, but also repaying it and obviously paying the interest on it. And ultimately, if your purity of your end product is not good enough, the OEMs who do an enormous amount of test work before they will sign any offtake agreements, they will understand that. And they will just end up either not buying your product, or they'll end up paying a much lower price, which obviously, again, creates a lot of pressure. So I'm happy to say that at Orom-Cross, we have all three of these, and that makes a huge, huge difference to the project going forward. In particular, we have all the infrastructure that we require near to the project, near to the mine site, including roads, including power, hydropower, I might add, and that provides us with a very low capital cost in comparison to our peers. And then beyond that, what matters is the relationships and the strategy. And for us, the strategy has evolved. We started off, like everybody else, looking to just produce a concentrate, and that's what our PFS looked at. But when we got deeper into it within the DFS, we realized that if you're going to be selling bulk quantities of product into the Asian market, particularly the small flake as concentrate, if the prices there are just not high enough to get you the returns that you need to change that strategy. You need to evolve, not just to produce a concentrate, but to get into other value-add products, which ultimately lift your end value. And so we'll go into that in a minute as well. And then for us, the relationships, obviously very important. The DFC, we'll talk about them. Mineral Security Partnership, accreditation, we find that to be very important, and ultimately the SPG partner that we've got as well. So let's dive straight into the DFC. I think it's very topical at the moment, and I know a lot of the questions that have come through have been asking about the DFC. It is the private sector lending arm of the US government, and then the DFC provided us with a $5 million grant in September 2023. We've accessed $3.5 million of those grant funds already, and the remainder is ready to be received as we hit milestones, as we complete the feasibility study. So the question that everybody's asking is, obviously, with the Trump government having come in and the all aid everywhere having been stopped, in particular, I guess, US aid, what is the impact of that on the DFC and in our relationship? Because it's not just the $5 million technical grant that we've received, but it's also the DFC's ability to cornerstone fund us going forward. That is to provide approximately 50 to 60% of the project requirement as debt. I'm happy to say that we met up with the DFC in Cape Town at the Indaba conference. And whilst things are obviously up in the air and there's a lot of people confused and not really able to give us all the answers that we want at that point, which was a couple of weeks ago, I will say a couple of things. Firstly, we got a very strong sense of support from the DFC. They continue to support our project in all ways possible, which is great. They've always loved Orom-Cross, and they've always wanted to take the long-term view, which is why they gave us the grant in the first place. Secondly, they pointed out that Trump set up the DFC in his first term in office, and it's his little baby. So he's obviously more likely to support the DFC than any other organization in that capacity. And thirdly, at that point, which has now been ratified, there's a new CEO that Trump has appointed as the head of the DFC going forward. So the view that we were given by the DFC participants at that meeting was that the DFC is going to continue going forward, and possibly, although it's not yet borne out in fact, but possibly they will have an enhanced mandate, which will be more aggressive perhaps than what they've had to date, which may mean that we can get further assistance And I don't know exactly how that will pan out, but you can be sure that I am going to find out. But as the dust settles, we expect to see our grant money come through, and we'd expect to see the DFC funding go forward. So that's good news. We've obviously got to wait and see how it actually materializes, but all the signs are very positive in that regard. And for us, it's a hugely important relationship, because with DFC cornerstoning our project implementation funding solution, it obviously provides a great deal of comfort for other parties to work around them, with them. MSP, I think it's still a very early stage relationship in many ways. This is a quasi-government organization which effectively is an alliance of 14 major nations which have one goal in mind, and that is to support the critical mineral supply chain. And we are one of the accredited projects. I'm expecting at some stage that the MSP will have a fund, and that will become a part of our funding solution. But at this stage, they don't. So it just remains there in the background, and we'll work with them as we go forward. So what does production look like for us? I think it's very important for us to start off with a slower de-risking phase one approach. And that is to get production moving as quickly as possible in 2026 with a smaller 5,000 ton concentrate delivery. So it's a smaller plant that can be shipped out, it can be put together very quickly, it can deliver, and our team on site can mine and process and deliver graphite in a way that showcases and provides them with the experience. And once they've got that experience, we can build on it into phase two, where it gets 10 times in terms of the commercial scale, and we deliver 50,000 tons of concentrate. And then ultimately phase three, where we build this downstream facility in country, where we can take some of our small flake concentrate and we can turn it into purified graphite. And at the same time, we've got the project SAFELOOP, which becomes an opportunity for us as a big off-taker, and I'll go into that in a minute. And ultimately, as everything grows in terms of market demand, which we expect, we'll move the project into phase four and phase five, where we just grow the scale. So let's have a look at what we're going to do and why. This is where we are in Uganda. We're in the northeast, and the biggest single problem we've got is the small flake concentrate selling into Asian markets doesn't sell for a lot of money, and therefore for us the solution is, let's put an SPG facility to purify the graphite from 96% up to 99.95, and let's locate it nearby. It's actually specifically designed here because there's a big power station literally next door, and we will be taking an enormous amount of power. One of the key requirements for purifying graphite is abundant power and cheap power, and we're fortunate enough to have that in Uganda. So we will be putting the facility right here, which means that we're saving an awful lot of money in terms of the cost of moving that small flake concentrate all the way down to the Mombasa port. We will just be moving at about 200 kilometers to the SPG facility and then upgrading it and value adding to it. And this is why we're doing it, because at the end of the day, as I said, if approximately half of your end product coming out of the project is small flake concentrate, and ultimately that product just does not get you enough money selling into the Asian markets, you have to find a way to value add for that particular portion. The large flake concentrate is not an issue. We'll be able to sell that directly as a concentrate and get higher prices. So for that half, it's not an issue at all. But the small flake, we needed to go away and find ways in which we can grade and up value add to that portion and get higher prices and higher value. And for us, that's micronization and downstream beneficiation. So what does that mean? Excuse me. The micronization essentially, in simple terms, means you're doing more grinding. You're grinding the concentrate into much smaller particles, micron sizes. As you can see, the different sizes there. It goes into niche markets, and it sells for a lot more money in those niche markets. So it's definitely a part of the solution. Very low additional capital costs, essentially some extra mills, specialist mills. But at the end of the day, you're getting a lot more money, but only on a very small volume. And we're working through with partners, offtake partners at the moment, and we hope to sell certainly a couple of thousand tons as micronized going forward. Downstream beneficiation is all about purifying graphite. Typically, 96-97% of all graphite in the world goes into China and gets purified there. But we have found, in terms of working with a partner over there, that they are quite scared themselves that their own government is going to ban the export of purified graphite outside of China. And as a result of that, they're very keen to build a facility with us in Uganda, which can provide uncoated, spheronized, purified graphite, SPG. And that will be sold only to customers who are outside of China, so that we can obviously keep within the remit of funding from the US government. But what it provides is a source of purified graphite outside of China, one of the first and only, which could become very, very important in a world where tariffs and retaliation against tariffs start to play a role, and graphite may be caught within that. For us, having this facility allows us to increment $500 per ton concentrate. That's what it sells for in the Asian markets, to about $2,000, $2,500 per ton SPG, and could be a lot more if this becomes, as I say, a geopolitical tool or weapon, and ultimately we can be one of the only suppliers outside of China. But it also delivers the cost savings to us, and it becomes a very big point of differentiation for us going forward. And what it really means is that together with micronization, we can lift our weighted average selling price and try and get ourselves towards that target of $1,500 per ton. If we're producing, as we'd expect, somewhere in the 400s, low $400 per ton as an operating cost, getting our overall weighted average basket up to these levels becomes extremely important going forward. And I think the third aspect of this area where we're trying to value add is looking to sell as much product into the Western markets as a concentrate, as a small flake concentrate, because it does sell for a lot higher prices. And for us, we're building those. My COO is actually sitting on an airplane at the moment heading to the States, where he's got a lot of meetings with parties that we've been working together with over the last couple of months to provide samples in order for us to build towards offtake relationships. But the more that we can sell into the Western markets at higher prices, it helps us deliver this value add in this particular area, which has obviously been of the major concern to most graphite projects going forward. And one of the reasons why you're not seeing a lot of graphite projects go into production, because if you don't have a solution there, you're just not going to make enough money to provide the returns required. One other aspect I want to touch on quickly is the SAFELOOP initiative. It's part of the Project Horizon renewable energy transition that the European Union is working towards. SAFELOOP is developing a Generation 3 lithium-ion battery, which will ultimately get used in a standardized EV bus to be deployed across the continent. Our involvement is as the exclusive supplier of all natural flake graphite into SAFELOOP. We're working closely together with American Energy Technology, AETC, which is a very specialist graphite company that's been working on both the cathode and the anode for these batteries, and ultimately they will be providing that to go into a gigafactory and ultimately into the bus. For us, this is a project that we can sit quietly and watch, feeling quite confident that it's going to take place. The European Union is funding it. There's a lot of very, very smart people within the team that is developing this project and this battery. And ultimately, if it goes into production in 2027, as anticipated, it will start to ramp up pretty fast. And ultimately, the numbers in terms of volumes that they will be demanding from us could become pretty substantial pretty fast. And again, what does this give us? It gives us that Western offtake partner, as I mentioned back here, which provides us with the opportunity to get small flake concentrates sold at a much, much higher price than selling into Asian markets. And that will become worth its weight in gold, because at the end of the day, everybody's trying to do what we're trying to do, and that is find the niche Western offtake partners. And they don't typically take huge, big volumes at this stage. So anybody who can find a partner like SAFELOOP that's going to provide a big, big offtake relationship and ultimately a long-term annuity stream at very profitable margins becomes extremely valuable. What do we have to do for SAFELOOP? We've provided all the samples. We're really just sitting back, being part of this team, doing everything we can to make sure that it goes forward, that it provides a great opportunity for us, and again, differentiation to our peers. Last, but certainly not least, I want to quickly touch on sustainability. I guess it's not quite the buzzword that it was before Trump came back into office, but I think it's still very, very important. At the end of the day, two parties really are concerned about this. The first is the funding partners. The whole sustainability aspect is increasingly important to banks and to equity placeholders. So we want to ensure that we are providing one of the greenest graphite projects that we can. We're very lucky to be able to take our energy requirements as hydropower of the national grid in Uganda, but we are looking at a whole host of different other options in order to try and present ourselves ultimately as a net zero project, or as close to that as we possibly can. We're looking at different solutions, different opportunities in order to be able to produce graphite and green graphite, and ultimately we'll make sure that none of these impact negatively commercially, but that you'd be amazed at what's available out there at the moment, so we can work on that. Same thing with the community. We've got a community agreement in place, and ultimately we want to give back to that community. We're not displacing anybody, which is fantastic, but with that agreement in place, we're going to be returning a lot of value to the local community, and we already have made the first payment, which has made a big difference to their life, and that obviously helps a lot in terms of where we're going with this project. So that's a very important part of it. And I don't really want to say a whole lot more. I think I'm going to hand over to the Q&A from this. Obviously, the corporate slide here shows that we still have not yet realized the value in this company, which Orom-Cross presents for us. I think, as I mentioned before, at the front end of this, there's a lot of value inflection in terms of completing this drilling program, in terms of completing the funding solutions, both for phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and then the DFSs for all of them, and ultimately taking this into phase 1 production in 2026. And I think over the next 12 months, as all of this starts to work out one by one, we should start to see the market cap and obviously the share price grow. So, Sarah, I don't know how much time I've taken. I apologize, I've not been looking at my watch, but I'm going to leave it at that. And I think I'll ask you to perhaps open the floor to a few questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got 8 minutes left. There's a lot we can achieve in that time. And thank you for assuaging our concerns over Trump and the relationship with the DFC. Also, right at the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about how Uganda is so corporately inclusive. But one of the questions that has come in advance is about, there's been a lot of attention on the Rwanda DRC M23 border conflict. Given Orom-Cross's location, do you foresee any impact on operations or logistics?
In simple terms, no. That's happening right down here. Here's Rwanda southwest, and it's actually happening in DRC. It's not even happening in Rwanda. We're right up in the complete opposite side. So no, we don't see anything happening or impacting us from that. Not at all.
You have sort of given comforting commentary about financing and partnerships. There's been a suggestion that perhaps it would be an idea to dual list elsewhere. Somebody says, surely the current market cap will make it difficult for you to secure the tens of millions of dollars investments needed in order to move into production. Are you concerned about this, or is a dual listing under consideration?
Look, it's a very good question. I think some people, when they don't get the market caps or the share price they want, can immediately say, let me go off to a greener pasture and eat the greener grass on the other side of the fence. And it's not always the case. So I'm not in a hurry to do that, because I'm not seeing an awful lot of differentiated value for companies on the Australian exchange or in Canada. In order to answer that question, it's actually a really good question. We think that we'll be able to get a much better valuation for our project at a project level. And so once we've completed the feasibility studies, we're talking to a number of strategic investors at the moment. We had a very, very good Ndaba conference in Cape Town. Not only met with a lot of parties that want to debt fund us, but also equity funding and strategic investment partners. And every one of them, we've talked about the concept of coming in at a project level. I can obviously negotiate a much higher valuation project level than I can do on the London Stock Exchange right now. And I don't want to dilute us or our shareholders considerably by doing that. So make no mistake, that's something that we're looking at, to bring in an equity partner, because it does have to have some equity component alongside debt, but to do it at a project level. And we have some very, very interesting discussions with parties that we're talking to at the moment.
Well, obviously, investors are fixated on share price performance, and the most recent update confirmed Orom-Cross's access to abundant, low-cost hydropower, which is a huge benefit in terms of costs and your ESG credentials. It was a good update, yet the share price hasn't reacted. So do you think the market hasn't fully understood the significance of that update?
Look, I don't think it's understood the significance of many, many things that we've done. I mean, we put in, nearly $5 million for free, and our share price has gone down. With that money, we've obviously gone and done a lot of work, and that hasn't necessarily factored in either. But, rather than dwell on the things that have happened in the past where markets have been tricky, what I'd focus on is the next milestones going forward. And that for us is drilling, obviously getting this completed and substantially incrementing our resources and reserves. Then offtake relationships. We've been going through this pre-qualification process, and we're now getting at the back end of this. So we've got a lot of offtake contracts, MOUs, agreements coming through, and ultimately funding, because at the end of the day, the funding is what's on everybody's lips. As I mentioned, we've got enormous amount of interest both for debt and for equity, and then ultimately completing these DFSs. And I might add there's 3 of them, because we've got separate feasibility studies that we're working on for all of phase 1 here, phase 2, and phase 3. Ultimately, they'll all come together in one big DFS document that will present the whole plan and strategy going forward, but they are actually 3 investment decisions in their own right. So there's a lot of milestones in terms of news flow going forward, in terms of positive actions, and obviously, hopefully, that will start to impact on the share price.
Okay, you and I are discussing a lot about looking ahead and what's to come, but let's discuss what's happening now, because drilling and the progress of the drilling has been a key focus for shareholders. It's been nice to see some visuals from the site on social media. So can you give us a quick update on how the campaign is going and what the rationale for incrementing the resource might be?
Well, as the announcement said, we finished the geotech holes. We're now onto the infill drilling, which will upgrade the resources to reserves, the 2 deposits that we drilled previously. And ultimately, beyond that, we'll be going into the new deposit that we're looking at to showcase the step out in terms of a new target. And look, the rationale for doing this is that, as I mentioned before, we've got some absolutely critical differentiated strategy in terms of the downstream processing, in terms of the SAFELOOP project. And these are going to call upon some significant volumes going forward. And we needed more reserves in order to bring those into our DFS to ultimately make that DFS look bigger and better. And so we're drilling some more holes. And ultimately, hopefully, that's going to be successful and it's going to produce what we need.
Final question. It's about the SAFELOOP initiative, which might be news for people who've joined us and want to learn about the other companies. So SAFELOOP, within sort of 60 seconds, if you can talk to us about that initiative, because it's been a major validation of Orom-Cross graphite.
Yeah, I think the thing to grasp is that AETC is one of the most experienced technical consultants in the world, and they've come specifically to us to ask us to be the exclusive supplier. Why have they done that? Because they've done the work and realized that our end product is as pure as they see. They want and they believe that it's going to make a difference next week. But in the forthcoming years, I think it's going to make a huge difference as we go forward and provide a unique Western offtake partner who will pay a lot more money. We've got exclusivity. It ultimately provides a huge value add for this project going forward. And we don't really have to do a whole lot of work to make that happen. We've done what we need to do. We'll sit and watch.
Lovely. And it's been a pleasure listening and watching to you too. Thank you very much indeed, Mike. Lots to look forward to, and good to hear about what's happening now. And we can see it, of course, on your social media as well. Mike, thank you very much indeed.